Yo, what's up, Canada? Today you are listening to Butting Heads. I'm Chris. This is Adam. And today we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about the American Families Plan that the Biden administration has just rolled out. We're going to be talking about vaccine patents around the world. We're going to be talking about the crisis in Israel and Jerusalem. And we're going to finish it off just talking about some dumb things that Ben Shapiro said because, it's Tuesday. So another day, another dumb thing that he said. But let's get it kicked off, Adam. The American Families Plan. What do
Well,
you think?
first, before we kick this off, I would like to thank every single listener to the first episode of our podcast. It was the highest listened to inaugural podcast in the history of all podcasts. The numbers from the big silicon tech companies will lie to you and say that it wasn't. They're liars, they're losers. Forget about them. Trust me. Thank you. But also thank you to all the Canadians out there too. Okay. Yeah, sure. The American Family Plan.
Well, so it starts out as an infrastructure plan, but it throws a lot more stuff in
Throws in
there.
a lot.
Well, okay, so it does a lot of things. It does a lot of things for education. I believe it said like free community college
Yep.
and at least 4 years of free education.
Education.
That's one of the first points.
And I actually really like the education part because it's not necessarily limiting it to like college. So this could also like include, I believe, like trade schools as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if it actually does anything on student debt, but it does offer 4 years of free education, direct support to children and families.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would have to read more into what that means. But it would extend tax cuts for families with children. Um, yeah, universal preschool. I mean, this is a lot for an infrastructure bill.
It's
Um, yeah,
yeah, no, it's really massive and like I honestly part of me really feels as like I don't know. Like it just feels too big. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah. Well, and then so the other thing that comes up. So I remember when you texted me about this the other day, and this is why the show is called Butting Heads, because I think during the election, I was definitely one of those people that, like, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden because
Mm-hmm.
for me, he didn't earn my vote. And maybe you had other reasons where you were going to vote for Joe Biden, even though you'll admit maybe he's not like your favorite guy in the world. But
Yeah.
I think when I saw this bill, I immediately thought to myself, okay, if he actually fights for this, and can get something like this passed through, I would actually have to like reconsider how I think about that stuff. But at the same time, like he can't do what Barack Obama did and just write down the things he wants on a piece of paper or put it on a website just to show you that he would want those things if he could, but he can't, so he won't. And it's just a real easy way to gain support from people without actually having to do anything. So I just really want to see this guy actually put the screws on some people and fight to get these things passed and know that he's the president. He just got elected. People support him. He ran on a public option. He ran on all the things that he's trying to pass in this bill. So people support this and that's why they did elect him. So I do think he needs to come through with this to get any credit from me. What
So
say you?
yeah, I would say like unfortunately like Republicans exist, right? And they make up 50% of Congress or 50% of the Senate. And unfortunately, the filibuster exists. And like even in the past, like the Green New or not the Green New Deal, the regular New Deal, and even the Great Society that like Johnson passed, heavily relied on like Democratic supermajorities. I honestly think something like this could probably pass in various parts if like underneath like a Democratic supermajority, but like I don't I don't know exactly how this would pass with like 50
Well,
Republicans.
what about, first of all, you can turn any bill into a bill that just needs 51 votes in the Senate, which you do have a majority of, and you do have a tiebreaker with the VP, and you do have the Congress. So you could turn anything into something where you would need 51 votes. You would just have to put certain provisions in the bill that it would expire after 10 years. Just like, I mean, this is the same argument we had when Barack Obama just wrote down on his website that he wanted to do a public option and then claimed that, oh, I need 60 votes, and so I can't get the 60 votes. And I think that's been heavily discussed that he absolutely could have passed it in a way where there's 51 votes. And how come they can lower corporate taxes by over 10% with
Because
51 votes?
that was through
But
reconciliation.
and so you can use a reconciliation process here too. With a public option and with all these other things. You can always pass something through reconciliation. You just need to adjust the bill a certain way. And so, I mean, if you really want to pass something, you kind of got to do what you got to do. And if you really want to win a second term, and if you want to get more seats in the Senate and the House, then it would behoove you to actually do something about healthcare when people are losing their healthcare and they don't want an expansion of Obamacare. People want a public option that they can buy into that's not going to be a health insurance company that can just throw you out at any time that they want. Yeah,
Um,
I know I just did a lot of talking there, but
no, that's
yeah,
fine.
you go ahead.
I mean, there are definitely tricks to, like pass bills, like going past through like the 51 votes. Unfortunately, every time you do that, sometimes you do sacrifice a lot of like purity of the bill, or I guess. And by that, you have to like change it in specific ways where maybe it won't be like as strong as it like originally is. And honestly, I would actually be for like any measures that can actually like get it passed because I think like most of the stuff in here is a net good and should be pushed for.
Sure, yeah. I think the one thing though that would bother me is that if you switch it from a public option to a system of expanding the Affordable Care Act,
So
because yeah,
like I
go
like
ahead.
I like kind of texted you this like earlier, right? Like I feel like the only way you could really like improve upon like the like ACA is pretty much having like a public option. Like it's like because like really the only things you can either really do is either like force states that haven't accepted the Medicaid expansion to accept the Medicaid expansion or just allow people to buy in to Medicare, like or like find a way to like somehow lower premiums.
And you can't say, okay, listen, there's a problem with healthcare. There's also, we don't want to do anything because there's these huge corporations that make a ton of profit. So, how can I come to a solution that satisfies the people's healthcare needs, but also doesn't destroy these giant corporations? How about we do a system of subsidies where we subsidize customers who wouldn't normally receive healthcare because they're deemed unprofitable? We take unprofitable customers and we subsidize them. And so I think that level of compromise that does nothing to help actual American people. And so
Well,
a compromise like that between corporations and people, if you need to compromise to get a bill through, that's one thing. But when the compromise is just because you're afraid to do any damage to the people that fund all the people in the government, you don't. That's a compromise that we as people cannot be willing to take. And it's compromises they don't make in other countries in the world. It's a compromise we make here, and we shouldn't put up with that. Right?
well, I mean, a lot of people who have their insurance, they're somewhat enjoy on average when they're polled about it, they do like it. A lot of people don't like the idea of a lot of people complain about insurance because of their prices, but when it comes to the quality of insurance, they actually somewhat like it. At least when you have see opinion polls about how people feel about their insurance. Over a vast majority of Americans with insurance prefer to stay on the insurance that they currently have, which is also
Also, when you poll people, they prefer to be on Medicare, and they prefer. Yeah, there's a lot of polls
no.
in
The
favor.
first question is, do you think that the United States should have a Medicare for all? And then a lot of people is overwhelmingly yes. However, when you go break it down, it sounds like more people are in favor of a public option. But when people are then asked, would you rather stay on your public insurance? A lot of those questions, a lot of that vast support for Medicare for all really shortens.
Even regardless of that, even throw that issue to the side, which I agree that that how you ask the question, just like you said, can also lead people to say that they prefer. I mean, my private insurance just takes my money out of my paycheck every week, and if I ever decide I need to go to the doctor for anything, I'm just gonna have to pay a ton in copays. So I don't know how that actually helps me. But regardless of that side, okay, people are popular with it. And you did just mention the public option.
Yeah.
Doing the expansion of Affordable Care Act because people are happy with their health insurance rather than doing a public option.
Well, it's the
I mean,
same
you can
thing.
still have your health insurance when there is a
Yeah.
public option.
Yeah.
So then just expanding the Affordable Care Act is really a compromise with people that we, the ones who choose the government and vote for them, we don't want them making these sort of compromises.
Well,
We want it in the interest of us. And that's why, so I am a Medicare for all guy, but I will accept a public option because it's a policy that competes with insurance companies, and it's something that instead of profits going to insurance companies who constantly throw people onto the streets, it's not about profit. It would be about healing people. It's not about denying people who have certain health conditions. So even though I am a Medicare for all guy, that is something that's actually challenging the power structures that have ruined our healthcare system, where expanding the Affordable Care Act is is embellishing, and it's assisting those power structures that have ruined our healthcare system. So that's why, for me, I can make a compromise on the public option, but the Affordable Care Act to me is just unacceptable.
yeah. So, which is
It was created by Mitt Romney. Let's not act like
it was actually created by Richard Nixon back in the 1970s because Republicans
there
needed
you go.
their
There you go.
solution
So I
to
mean, we're not
healthcare.
talking. This is a solution that that people on the right have come up with because they see it's undeniable in poll numbers.
Yeah.
People, and it's undeniable in cost when you look at cost per person of medical care. It's undeniable that they have to look like they're doing something about this issue while not harming the corporations that they slave over. So it is sort of a right-wing idea, and it's upsetting to see the Democrats in government sort of embrace this and calling it like a left-wing solution to healthcare when it's subsidizing corporations. I don't know, man. That doesn't seem very
So,
left-wing to me.
I mean, really, if anything, that's I don't know, if anything, I see Republicans calling it more left wing than Democrats really using the term. Really,
Sure.
unfortunately,
Obama
the
at least.
unfortunate reality is that again, since Harry freaking Truman, and technically maybe since FDR, really, with his second speech for the second Bill of Rights, his economic Bill of Rights, in which he mentioned the need for a universal healthcare system. Democrats have tried. They tried it with Truman. They tried it with Johnson. Johnson saw some success. Kennedy tried it. I believe Carter also talked about it. Bill Clinton tried it back in the 90s. There was a massive push for universal health care.
Okay, but
But like,
then,
unfortunately, no success came until 2008 with Obama, with finally passing the ACA. Like, that came after 60 years of Democrats trying and trying to pass some form of like universal system of healthcare. Did it
yeah.
happen? No, it didn't. But did it
So
open
so
up
how
health
long?
insurance to millions of people who've never had access to insurance? Did it set up levels of like, it did, especially through like stuff like oh crap, what's it called? Pre-existing conditions, which was one of the
Sure.
massive like improvements that like actually helped
But
a lot of people who could never get health insurance.
how long can you keep writing public option on your list of how long can you keep writing public option on your website during your campaigns? Like you said, if they've just been doing it since Harry Truman,
How long can
it
like
just seems a little disingenuous.
how long can Republicans say fuck you until they get
I
back?
mean, I
Like
mean,
the issue is
they said
Republicans
fuck you about
exist.
civil rights laws. They said fuck you about
Yeah.
Social Security.
Yeah, and Democrats had super majorities with those.
So,
So you
but
need a
wait,
Democratic super majority.
super majorities to get civil rights? That was in the
Yes.
60s. So then that undoes. So how come they don't use the super majority then to get a public option? Because you're saying that
They got
they can
Medicare
pass
and
all these other
Medicaid through
things. Why?
those.
Because they're not actually real
Medicare
about
and
passing a
Medicaid got
public option,
those.
because that would actually hurt corporations. And a civil rights bill, as important as it is, there's no corporate donors on the other side paying them not to do that.
Medicare and
That's my
Medicaid. The
point.
Great Society came throughout.
And so, right. And so, how do they pass Medicaid and Medicare, but then a public option, you're telling me, has been impossible for the last 80 years to possibly have passed?
Because politicking at the time, like
Well, okay,
it was through certain,
well, okay, so
not enough
politicking at the
politicians,
time. So
not enough
that's what it is. It's
politicians, not enough
politicking at the
politicians. Yeah.
time. It's 80 years of politicking at the time. Like, so it's just people are getting tired of
Well,
it.
cool. Guess what? Guess what? Get fucking involved. That's it. Get
So
involved.
yes, so I mean, all you can do is get involved and start telling people, look at how they write it on their website for campaign after campaign after campaign, and they don't do that. I mean, other than making people aware of it, what else can you do about it? Which is what
Well,
I'm
so you can
doing.
organize. You can show that you can. You
You can
can show.
organize against the Democratic Party to show that they better actually run on a public option and actually go and do it. I mean, that's a good strategy, honestly. Like,
Look,
that's what people need to be doing.
I mean, you can also then, but like if you're doing it at the same time, you should be trying to ensure that you get more Democrats in Congress. So that way you can constantly bully them into the right
So that they
position.
can write something on their website and then not do it?
No, because that way they don't have an option not to do it.
Yeah, they do, because as we just talked, it's they can pass Civil Rights Act, they can pass all these other acts, they can create a NASA program. They can do all sorts of things with Democratic majorities as they've gotten those things through, but they can't do this. And they had pretty much 59 senators or something like that in 2008.
Yeah, they lost the special election mainly because of like universal health care. Mainly because like the Obamacare was on the docket. That's like the one senator from Massachusetts heavily ran for because of that, for whatever freaking reason. That's and then like Democrats lost the seat.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said all I need to say about this. You can let the listeners just think about this. Is there anything else we want to get into on the family's plan?
Nothing really. I'm just gonna end with policy is difficult. There are different, like, it's really like it's to like why like certain policy gets passed and doesn't get passed. Like, there's never like a simple answer, and you always have to go into like the histories and personalities at the time to like see why that happens. That's really all I have to say. Like, why civil rights was able to pass, or like why, for instance, like Medicare and Medicaid were able to pass, but not like the public option in general. I don't really know. Like that's a good question. That is a good question, and that's actually something I'm interested in.
Okay. I think next we're going to be talking about the vaccine and the patents. And for the listeners who don't know, just really quick to sum this up, there's a huge issue right now because certain corporations or entities have created vaccines, and they want the right to sell it across the globe. And certain countries who don't have access to the vaccine could be making the vaccine and theoretically distributing it and keeping people safe from COVID. But because it would be a violation of the law to just produce something that somebody else has patented, they're unable to produce these vaccines. And so there's a lot of issues around this, and there's a lot of discourse. There's a lot of people saying that um, that the vaccines would help if you alleviated the patents, and there's other people saying that no, it wouldn't help that much if you alleviated these vaccines. And this is a real global issue. It's very important. So we're going to start with Adam and just give some initial thoughts or an initial summarization.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, like for all the talk about like just opening up like patents, it's not really that helpful. Unfortunately, like a lot of like, for instance, like a lot of the vaccines are like through mRNA, which is very new technology, which very few like plants around the world can actually like have the technology to actually like manufacture. A lot of the issues with the current COVID production issues isn't necessarily due to like a lack of production, but may necessarily due to a lack of resources needed to produce the vaccine. And also, there is like concerns with like safety standards and whatnot. If, for instance, with the new technology, like if you try to like put it like new technology, like rush new technology into new areas, in which like people aren't necessarily like know exactly well how to do it, there may be like an issue with safety concerns that can then like harm global pandemic or global vaccination levels. Like for instance, with the Johnson and Johnson, there was a there was a bad batch that
Mm.
really slowed down the vaccination progress in across the globe, especially in America. And yeah, that happened in America where we do have pretty good conditions. Uh, Grant?
So, so the world would be worse off if we allowed other countries to use these patents.
So the
Do
thing
you
is,
agree with that statement?
no, it would
The
be.
world would, so then the world would be neutral,
I don't think it
or
would. It
would
wouldn't.
the
It's not really addressing the issue. It's getting a lot of talk, but it's not addressing the issue. That's the
I
issue.
think even you can admit the world would be better off if other countries were allowed to use these patents.
Like, so here's the thing: you can tell them to use the patent, but like they don't necessarily have the recipe. They would have to like try to re-engineer the recipe.
And I also think that there's a lot of this. Oh yeah, they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't know how to do that. They would mess up the batches. There could be, and then you just say even a story about how Johnson and Johnson was creating it and they messed
Yep.
it up.
So
So I mean, they're allowed to create it and mess it up here and give it to people, but you can't create it and mess it up there and
I
give it to
mean,
people.
yeah, and we see the consequences of them messing up, right? Like just because like
It's sort
something
of just
bad thing happened
assuming
doesn't
these
mean
people
everything.
are like so stupid.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
If it's like saying like
I
even like
mean,
an expert, like for instance, like say you have like a marksman who can hit a bullseye like 99 times out of 100, and then he misses the bullseye once, and you're saying, well, the marksman missed the bullseye. Guess he can't really hit it, or I guess he's not as great. Like it's not really. It's
theoretically,
having like a
if you're
good.
making a vaccine here, yeah,
So
huh?
chemical processes are very, very specific that require, like, for instance, just because like countries have plants does not mean they have like the proper plants to actually manufacture the vaccine. Plants are very specialized, designed for very specific chemicals and very and outputs of feeds. A
So
lot of the equipment in those plants are specifically designed for like proper levels of like what you're looking for.
so when Johnson and Johnson says, listen, it really wouldn't help people. It really wouldn't be right if other countries were to use our patents. Um, they're just genuinely just concerned that this could hurt people more than help people.
I
It's
mean,
like,
you can try to like picture it as like big business trying to screw over the little guy as much as you want, but like really a lot of companies, like there have been some companies that have decided not to like enforce patent laws.
in what circumstance? Like
Like,
just,
like actually in this circumstance, I forget which one it was, but
and is that a good thing?
sure, it can be like it's fine. Like
Well,
again, the issue is like the issue. No, okay. So I guess here's the solution. Okay, or let me. Okay, opening up patents doesn't really do it. But you know what? If you want to have like these vaccine manufacturers license out all the plants that can actually handle the machine, send over their guys and make sure that they're looking over all parts of the process or the parts of the processes that they need to be to make sure that the vaccine is running at their standards that have been able to create millions of proper vaccines that have gone into like millions of Americans with no side effects whatsoever. Great. That's it. You don't have to open up patents to do that. Also, if you want to do the patents, then like a lot. I guess like a lot of the concern that I'm not necessarily too convinced on is that if you just have the patent open up, you may discourage future development of global vaccines. I think that's fucking. I think that's horseshit.
yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I'm not really saying, oh no, they need like, no, but like the issue is if the issue is vaccine supply, opening up a patent doesn't do that.
Okay. I think I would have to disagree with you there. I just don't know if there's any more that I haven't already said that I could really add. Yeah, it's interesting to see how this does develop.
Also, production capacity is like the issue is also like with material. Like there isn't like enough material to like make like vaccines past like the certain amount. Like there's like a shortage in like the supply chain.
Right. So,
So, and again,
yeah,
opening
it's
up a
just
patent doesn't do shit. Like there are
okay.
serious issues that can solve like issues like if you think like for instance like I think like for instance when it comes to like producing mRNA vaccines, all the facilities that can produce like mRNA at like that scale, I think they're currently being used and I think they're currently at like full production.
Well, I have heard that there are factories in other countries that would be ready to produce the vaccine, that all they need is the legal permission to be able to do so. So I have heard a lot on the contrary
Well, they
about
can probably like
factories.
well then sure, if you want to like license them out, then fine, that can happen. You don't need the patent to be open up to do that.
And it's just you just have a general, you don't believe countries um have the infrastructure and the ability right now, if they got the patent, to be able to actually make it, or if they did make it, they wouldn't be making it accurately all the time. Is that a fair statement?
So if you just release the patent, you're not releasing the recipe, so then that would mean the other countries will have to try to like backtrack from like what current doses are to like try to figure out how you made it and then have figure out how to make it to scale. And then from there that can then increase differences in the vaccine types,
Yeah,
which can then lead to further
I
issues
do
down the
think
line.
I do
Like
think in future um epidemics, you really can't have private corporations making these vaccines. I really think that this is showing us that if you want the vaccine to reach more people, you would need to publicly fund research into vaccines because it shouldn't just be about who has the patent and they're going to decide who gets to produce and who doesn't. I just feel like that's sort of an injustice.
Yeah, sure. Like, yeah, if uh, like in future vaccine, like if there was like a more of a government funded effort to like produce a vaccine as well as like private, that's fine.
Yeah.
That would have
Yeah.
been great.
And then if someone, it's not like, oh, but we can't give them the recipe because as you're saying, you can
Yeah,
give them the patent, but you can't.
yeah,
Well,
but
then it's like, okay, what do we need the recipe for? We're not actively trying to make trillions of dollars off of it.
yeah.
We're trying to heal people. So then you can just give other
Then
people
yeah,
the
you can just do
recipe,
it.
as
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah,
So I think also just to end on that note, it maybe let's just look at some future pandemics and how we can set things up differently to make sure we're not in this like stupid patent situation next time.
yeah. And that's like a great way to learn about it. And also maybe even seeing like, okay, what can be future? Because like again, a lot of the huge problems right now, issues in the manufacturing, like issues in the supply chain process.
Okay, another thing that we do kind of just have to get into, if you look at the news, you've been seeing Jerusalem and Israel and Palestine in the news. You've been seeing a mosque being bombed. You've been seeing police, Israeli police officers cracking down on protesters. We've been seeing people getting kicked out of their homes. We, so we've had Israeli courts just deciding on Palestinian territory that people have to lose their homes, and this is totally contrary to any sort of international law. And people I talk to that are really up to date on the Israel-Palestine issue say that this is even similar to like an historical event, sort of like the first and second intifada. Like this is, on the scale. I mean, I've heard this even start being referred to as like sort of a third intifada. So this is a really big issue. I wanted to make sure we get to it. If we want to get to, I saw a tweet and everyone's ripping on this tweet. So first of all, you have people like Bernie Sanders, who's Jewish,
Oh,
come
is
out
this Andrew
against.
Yang?
Oh yeah,
Is this the
yeah,
Yang
that's
tweet?
exactly where I was going. So you have people like AOC, you have people like Bernie Sanders who definitely can be critical of them. But I was glad to see them come out against this obvious human rights abuses that are going on. And so then I scroll past their tweets, and I'm scrolling, and I just stop. I see Andrew Yang's dumb face, and he's apparently got his head in the sand right now. I don't know if he has seen the videos online of what is happening, or if he's ignorant, or if he's actually seen the guy telling the woman that she has to leave her house, and if he doesn't take it, someone else will. I don't know how he's seen these videos that are viral online or seen the video of the mosque being bombed, which is totally would be considered an act of terror under any other circumstances. I don't know how he can see that and then come out with a tweet how he's in support of Israel. I mean, I just think that's a huge miscalculation. And we know Andrew Yang is running for mayor of New York, and he's doing the political calculation that there's a lot, New York has a vibrant Jewish community. But I'll just come out and say, like, we saw Bernie Sanders come out against this. We see all sorts of people, Katie Halper, we see all sorts of people who just are Jewish and come out against this. So to make the calculation that he's doing, that he's really going to gain a lot of support in New York from all the Jewish people in New York, I think that is a huge miscalculation. And he just looks really bad in this tweet in support of Israel right now. What do you think, Adam?
This is the one where he decries Hamas, right?
Um, I'm just talking about.
He says, I stand in solidarity with the people of Israel against the rocket attacks by Hamas.
Yeah, let me just get to it.
Because
So,
that's the one I saw, and like my issue with that one was that he kind of should have at least called out the actions of the Israeli government for that have been occurring for like at least in that for at least like a month at the very least.
yeah, so did he like delete this tweet?
I think so too. I'm kind of looking for it right now.
Yo, he
Oh
deleted
wait, there
that
it
tweet.
is. There it is. I found it. I'm standing with people of Israel who are coming under bombardment and attacks and condemn the Hamas terrorists. The people of New York City will always stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel who face down terrorism and persevere.
Yeah, so who's the one facing down terrorism, right? Is it the ones who have who have mosques being bombed and people being thrown out of their homes against any sort of international law? And so it comes to question, are you just supposed to accept your mosque being bombed, your people being thrown out of your home, and then any sort of retaliation for Andrew Yang? The retaliation to that is actually a terrorist attack, but the original bombing of a mosque or throwing someone out of their home or having a clash of police that kills 300 people, openly just killing people, that's not the terrorism. That's not the fascism. The fascism is if Hamas decides to shoot a rocket where they don't even kill anybody. And a lot of the rockets were intended not to hit anybody or any key um, spots, and they didn't kill nearly as many people as Israel, who even is killing children, and there's Palestinian children that are dying here. So Andrew Yang is the kind of guy, he can never say anything controversial. If you ask him anything about any issue other than UBI, he just dances around and you never have any idea what he actually stands for or what he actually means. He's always just trying to just kiss up and just trying to not say what's needed to be said and what's right. And to say his tweet is so much different than Bernie Sanders or AOC's tweet. His tweet is on the opposite side of what he should be saying. And the people of Israel don't need you to stand with them because they're not the victims here. And so you don't need to tweet support. Like, even though, like, I support the actual Israeli people, but in doing so, sending tweets like this, he's really just I mean, he's not calling out that we're supporting a government carrying out crimes against humanity. And so just this tweet really upset me, and it upset a lot of other people on Twitter as well.
Uh, yeah. So
And, and
again,
what was it that, go ahead, yeah.
oh no, what were you saying? You can finish.
Well, so what is it? The human rights, what's that organization? Human Rights Watch, or one of those big human rights, actually several big sort of organizations like that have ruled that these are crimes against humanity and these are human rights violations going on in Israel. So no one's saying that there's human rights violations against the people of Israel. There's human rights violations against the people of Palestine. So where is Andrew Yang? Does he have any opinion on that? Or he's just going to talk about Hamas, who fired a rocket in retaliation? And oftentimes you hear the defense of Israel, oh, well, we're just defending ourselves. We're not offending, we're defending. Here is a clear case of who is the offender and who is the defender. And I think people are so caught up that they automatically think in every situation that Israel is the defender and Palestine is the offender, that even when it's so clear in a situation like this, who is who, people still can't like wrap their brains around it and understand it. And also, I've seen an interview of Andrew Yang on Kyle Kalinske. Not on Secular Talk, but he was talking with Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske on like the podcast that they have, and he just sounded like, I mean, every question he just answered like completely different thing. Like, it seemed like he really just has no idea what's going on in these two countries. And for him to run for president and like not even have the slightest idea of the history or the conflict that's going on here, just, I don't know. I'm just really off of Andrew Yang about this. Any sort of, um, you know, like I would always say, he's not my guy, but Andrew Yang, he does the UBI. Okay, no, I'm like done with that with this guy. He's so spineless and he's such a coward that like all he knows how to do is talk about UBI, but also like even with that, he's just planning on cutting like unemployment and like
Yeah, pretty
all
much.
other things. So
And paying for it
so
without
I mean like this
value-added
guy's a
tax.
clown. So I mean, yeah, this guy's a clown. Like I'm done with this guy, especially for right now. He's gonna have to do a lot to get back in my good graces. For him, that was sort of like, I'm sure in his mind that was a benign tweet. It was a stupid thing to say right now. It's sort of like if someone died, you said, "Yeah, that guy was kind of an asshole," or something like that. It's sort of like you really you're gonna tweet about that right now. Can you wait for your tweet about support of Israel? It just seems like he just said like the wrong thing at the wrong time. That's an emotional time that would like really upset people, and it shows he made this political calculation, and that's all that tweet was about, was that he made a political calculation that the Jewish population in New York City, it would be more beneficial for him to tweet this rather than that. And it's just sad because I actually don't think that's true. The thing he was actually trying to accomplish in sending out that dumb tweet, um, I think that's going to turn back. I think that's going to turn back. And I don't think Jewish people across the world just automatically, just agree with everything the government in Israel does. That's a miscalculation on my end. I've seen a lot to go the other way on that. And it's not the same. Just because they follow the same religion doesn't mean they'll have the same opinions about and also just Israel, like they just violate international law left and right. Like they occupy the Golan Heights. They occupy all these sort of territories that international courts and the United Nations tells them they have to leave. They don't do that. And I don't think the general Jewish population actually supports. And I also don't think their religion actually condones what is happening in Israel right now. So I think he made a huge miscalculation.
Hey, wow. Look, you want to drop that mic right now? Oof. Wow. Uh, yeah, no, that I agree. This was definitely a political calculation by Yang. New York City is, I think, the second largest Jewish population in the world, only second to Israel, and technically has more than like Tel Aviv and the other major city.
Jeez. Jeez.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of New Yorkers with family within Israel. To be honest, I think my major issue with like that specific tweet is the fact that there is no mention of him with like any actions of the Israeli government. So like for instance, if he were like to also just like put out like for instance like what if he were to like to put out like I implore the government of Israel to take actions to reduce tensions in the area, stop your eviction plans, stop furthering like your encampments. Like, what if he were like to like maybe like respond with something like that? How would that make you feel?
That would make me feel um a, that would be considered a positive tweet to me,
Right.
rather than this is a negative.
Right. Like this would like also include him condemning Hamas for like the rocket attacks. Like,
Because just look at that tweet. If someone sort of doesn't fully know, you could just read the tweet and say, and then you could sort of make your mind look past a lot of the things that are happening there. So the tweet is just it's just a bad tweet. Yeah, and there's a lot of ways he could have reworded it. Um, or you could even have said something like, "We need peace in Israel," and I would love to see nothing more than these two sides just figure something out so we can avoid this bloodshed. And that's a way you can say it, something like that, where you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, where you're not just like
of-
completely ignoring like the other side of it.
yeah,
He's kind of making
yeah,
it the tweet
yeah,
makes it look like the
yeah,
rockets are coming out of a vacuum.
yeah. Yeah, or that the rockets are an attack on the defenseless people when, of course, okay, there's some truth to that. Also, it's a response to an attack. So who's the attacker? Who's the defender? I think anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's something we had to bring up. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Nothing really. Like nothing that like I guess like you haven't mentioned already. Just it's always like really difficult whenever talking about like Israel Palestine issues. There's a lot of history that like goes back into it. There's years of conflict, decades, arguably centuries, arguably a millennia of conflict. It's always important to like so like for instance like I think like this new wave of tension started after like I think a court case that was decided like a year ago when a Israeli court judge decided that Jews can return to their 1948 homes in East Jerusalem after Israel basically annexed it.
Right.
And because technically they didn't have the deeds, that'd be bad. Now, I think like one example of how this like shows like why some people call it Israel like an apartheid state is technically there was a lot of Palestinians who were like forcibly evicted from their homes by like Israeli Jews back at around the same time period. However, they're not able to reclaim their old homes under the same, even though technically it'd be
Right.
under similar situations.
Yeah. And I think I've heard someone, I don't know if it was Noam Chomsky or if it was just someone really smart said this one time, like in a weird, sick way, like Israel used to be a lot better at hiding their annexations and hiding their apartheid state and their colonization. But I think just over time it's just become so brazen that it's so much more accepted to call it an apartheid state, to actually compare it to South Africa, which I think even not too long ago, I just don't think people were there ready to admit that. But I think over since Netanyahu has really
Ramped
came into
up.
power,
Yeah.
and also like just the one last part about how like if like we're leftists and there's this right-wing regime in Israel, and I don't know, like it's sort of like shouldn't we
Yeah.
be more oppositional to that?
So I think it's so the unfortunate part is just like people like Netanyahu and like Hamas kind of like feed each other because both kind of like vindicate the other's existence in a way. So Netanyahu would like like continue like the expansion of like colonies or like or like or like allow like more and more atrocious policies that impacts Palestinians. Meanwhile, like elected officials within like the Palestinian Authority who are like trying to negotiate look like idiots because it's like, well, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. Meanwhile, Hamas comes by, they're the strong arms, and they're like, see, we're willing to fight back for you people. This is why we need help. And
Yeah.
so, like, unfortunately, the two ultra hardline people just feed each other, and it's awful, and like
Yeah, no, I
and
actually
then
agree
just
with that.
yeah, and like it like destabilizes the nation or the area because of it.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean Hamas, I mean my criticism of Hamas would just be I don't think it helps. I don't think their tactics actually works to get Palestinians away from this apartheid state. So, I mean,
To be honest, with like Hamas specifically, I would not be surprised if Hamas just hates Israel more than they care about Palestinians. Like,
yeah,
I'll
so
be like sometimes that's just what it feels like.
and yeah, that they do hate Israel. In the same way, sort of though, how the our founding fathers hated England. So I mean, I don't just sort of write them off as some kind of well, the thing is, and I just think we've talked about this before, like they're always just getting compared to terrorist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda as sort of these like their fight the fight for freedom in Palestine is sort of the equivalent to flying two planes into the Twin Towers. So I mean, that's just with me, like that those two things I feel like are sort of different because one is they're fighting for their own freedom.
So when we like talked about this before, I remember how like we talked about how like technically like a terrorist of one area can be technically a patriot of another area, right? How like
Yeah.
technically rebellion and revolution can, depending on like the perspectives that you look at it, are two sides of the same coin. That being said, it is probably very safe to assume that like while technically some people can look at it is possible to look at like Hamas and see like freedom fighters, it is almost undeniable to like not look at how, for instance, how long it took for them to recognize like Israel's right to exist, their attitudes towards Jews, how they often plant like ramp up anti-Semitism, and how there have been
I could
various
say
campaigns to
I
remove Jews from the entire region.
I could say all of that
You
about George
can't though. You
Washington.
can't. You
Yeah, I
can't.
could.
By definition, no.
What part couldn't I?
But the
Well,
fact
it
that
would instead
British
of Jewish
subjects were still
people, it
allowed
would
to
be
be here, the fact that
Anglo-Americans.
British people were still allowed to be here.
But but
We
I
didn't
mean, honestly
execute
though,
or we didn't throw out
if you
everyone who
were
was
a
British.
loyalist, if you were a loyalist during the you were allowed to be here if
Yeah,
you
but after we
supported.
win, or after George Washington won, he didn't execute them all. He didn't throw them out of the country. The issue is when Hamas says when they win, it may actually mean extermination for Jews in that area.
Okay. I think the situations are a little bit different, but George Washington, the founding fathers, did commit all sorts of torture, all sorts of killing of civilians, a general racism and hate of people of English, sort of that people were from England. And even through the War of 1812, that war is about a hatred of the Anglo-Saxon, as they often use that term a lot more often back then. But yeah, it was based on racism of hating them, and there were all sorts of crimes that had to be committed in order to, or you would just go on a British ship and dump tons of cargo into a bay. So I mean, these are acts of, I mean, couldn't you call that an act of terrorism? And when we put the guy on the dollar bill,
I mean, sure, yeah. Again, throwing cargo into a bay—that's an act of terrorism, and that's
there,
also like a
I
fine.
mean,
Like,
they killed
absolutely.
civilians, right?
Yeah. In some cases, they probably were, and that was not okay. And that's also an act of terrorism. Like again,
Yeah. So okay. So if
calling
okay,
for
so
like
then
the
if
complete
you have that same standard,
genocide,
the guy is on the dollar bill.
calling the complete genocide of Anglo Saxons is completely different.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
Like that's where probably a very steep difference is.
and it was okay, but there also is sort of the act of, you know, England had just permanently moved and sat its country inside of states of, the Northeast in New York and New Jersey. I mean, I wonder how quick the founding fathers would have turned and said, no, we need to exterminate every single British person who's here. So I think that's just more due to the fact that their homes weren't removed, but I'm sure they would have had that same exact sentiment if the reverse situation were true. No?
Well, I mean, if England
I
fought
mean, it doesn't sound
like
unreasonable. It actually doesn't sound unreasonable from their point of view to say, how do you just get up and form a nation and
they fought a
just
war for
have this
independence for a
country here?
year.
So they took it over.
They
Oh, okay,
took, like
you're talking
after the
about.
British mandate at Palestine. Yes, after the British left, they started and they began and they like started to form the state of Israel, and then every other Arab nation from Transjordan to Lebanon to like certain people in like the area of Palestine said no and went into war against them, and for a full year they had to defend themselves and they had to like go out and go, and that was not until like the UN, until like a line of peace, the Green Line, was resolved, and like the UN finally like allowed it because all the other countries
And
in
so
the
for
area
that
also
reason,
assigned peace
and
treaties.
so then in that case, you're saying this is just a legal takeover of this land, then they don't have this right to, I guess, not believe in its existence because it has like this legal right.
Well, I mean, they fought for it, and and like certain people and like people in the area did recognize it. Like there was an actual war for independence that was like fought for and like decided, and then there was also various campaigns afterwards, like including ones that like involved push Jews out into the sea. We won't stop until the Jews are out into the sea. Like,
And just so everyone's clear, I believe in the right of the existence of Israel, even though the circumstances of its creation, I don't agree with originally. But also at the same time, I do have sympathy for someone that says, no, this is just Palestinian territory that sort of got stiff-armed out of their, and now they have to live as second-class citizens. Not only do they have the territory taken away from them, now they have to live as second-class citizens, getting patted down every time you go into another town. It's beyond just like killing people and taking their homes. It's everywhere you go, everything you do. There's someone checking to make sure you don't have anything on you, telling you can and can't go somewhere, having to get all sorts of permits just to travel around, not having the same access to the water and the resources there. So yeah, like the people are upset and they don't want to live under this as second class citizens anymore. And how can you do that if there is an Israeli state there doing that to them? So it does make some logical sense to me. Like, if you can convince someone that they could be in, that they don't have to live under as second class citizens and Israel can exist at the same time. But I just think certain people start to lose that belief that as long as Israel is there, they won't be free. That's how a lot of people feel.
so you can be for the state of Israel, but also not agree with the state of like the West Bank. That should be a given, and that's absolutely fine. Because Israel's policies within the West Bank are absolutely terrible for the reasons that you mentioned. And also, I'll also throw on like medicine is also harder to get in the West Bank, and that's shitty. On the other hand, you can also be pro-Palestinian without standing Hamas. To be honest, I think like probably one of the biggest issues when it comes into this is how much attention Hamas gets. I think maybe like focusing more on like Fatah and like improving like Fatah's like political power in like the area could probably be a huge like boom for like relations. Fatah has like denounced their past terrorist actions that included stuff very similar to Hamas, which included stuff like suicide bombings and constant attacks on like Israeli civilians, and have like decided to like go about through the diplomatic route. To be honest, I think like probably like one of the biggest things that like U.S. lawmakers can probably do is try to boost relations with Fatah in that area and try to have like Israeli forces and like Fatah like try to negotiate something, which is that way like
Yeah.
to alternate to like present like an alternative to the people there besides Hamas.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I think I could get on board. I think I could get on board with that. I'm not a Hamas guy. Um, like yeah, killing civilians. I'm very much against killing civilians. So anyone who's doing that as a political movement
Yeah.
is just stupid. So
Plus
I
they
do
are terrible
sympathize
in
with certain
pretzels.
views that they have. If it was up to me, I wouldn't just be so. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but you can't let the anger about it just let you kill a random person who's walking on the street who has nothing to do with the situation at hand. That
Be-
really just releases anger, but that actually like doesn't help anyone. And who knows, like you could be killing someone who was an
agrees.
Israeli citizen on the side of against the apartheid of Palestine. So
Exactly.
it just doesn't work.
And it
Yeah,
does
it
go
just
the other
doesn't
way
work.
too. When Israel just mindlessly bombs like areas of like the West Bank, you could be killing people who don't hate you, but now you're making them hate you because you just killed their families.
Exactly. If
And like it's a
when
hate is a two-way street, and you should just
someone
go
kills a
again.
member of your family, the chances of you just forgiving that and moving on,
It is a lot harder.
yeah.
Just try. Yeah, that's
So it's messed up. We definitely do have to get more into this. Our co-head editor of McClure's Revenge is a just has become an expert on this issue. So I'm thinking eventually down the line we can have him on like for the podcast just because the amount that he's learned about the history of this place over the last like 300 years is just insane to me, and he just spends hours and hours like researching this stuff. So yeah, just letting the viewers know, I'm sure at some point we'll probably have him on just to give some thoughts and give some knowledge for some of us who might not be fully aware of everything that's happened over time there. But I think just to jump into our last phase, this is usually how we like to end the show. We'll just kind of have a clip of something really ignorant that we found someone saying, and then we just kind of,
just dunk on them.
dismantle that. So
Because really, at the
today we
end of
got
the
Ben Shapiro.
yep. Oh yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to say like
Yeah, so
because at the end of the day,
yeah,
we are
go ahead,
still
Adam.
friends. We hang out with each other.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah,
we get into
exactly.
arguments,
Exactly.
but
But we can agree that certain stuff is just dumb and that we'll both agree on that.
yeah, and just like
So
honestly,
without further ado, we're starting off with a Hall of Famer of ignorance. So yeah, Adam, why don't you play the clip?
okay, I'm just gonna and go.
I was screaming at the television when he's talking about taxes because what he is saying is so obviously asinine. When he says that rich people don't pay their fair share in this country, that is just an abject, disgusting lie. It is a lie. The top 10% of income earners in this country pay all net taxes, not some of the net taxes, all of the net taxes, because net taxes are defined as what you pay into the government minus what you get back from the government. So if you get back from the government more than you paid in, this means that you were not a person who paid net taxes into the government. Only the people at the top of the spectrum are paying net taxes in this country. All of the net taxes in this country. When he says they're not paying their fair share, the only thing he means by they're not paying their fair share is it should be nearly all of your income goes to the federal government. And when he says things like, I'm not going to tax anybody who's making under $400,000 a year, he is lying to you through his teeth. When he says I'm going to tax corporations, corporations are not human beings for purposes of taxes. The money that would have been passed on to you via income is being taxed up here. That money is now being withdrawn from the system and taken away from you. Corporations are going to have to raise prices in order to deal with the taxation effects. When he says that I'm going to tax all of these rich people on their capital gains taxes, what do you think those rich people are going to do rather than put their money in the stock market where they get taxed on capital gains? They're not going to put their money in the stock market. So what happens to your 401k if you're a union member or a teacher's union member? What do you think happens to all of the other 50% of the population who are invested in the stock market right now? And what happens to the businesses that hire you when Joe Biden decides that your boss needs to be taxed out of existence in order so that he can determine where the dollars go? This jackass who's never created a single job in his entire life.
The people who don't pay their fair share in this country are the poor. We need to raise taxes on the poor. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. The poor in this country pay zero. The lower middle class in this country pay net zero. So we have a group of people who pay no taxes, a group of people who pay no net taxes, a group of people who pay all the net taxes. And his argument is that it's category 3 who don't pay their fair share. Fair share means your percentage of taxes. We've determined that there are some people who shouldn't pay any percent of taxes. The only fair taxing system is one in which everyone pays.
I was
Fair. Their fair share. I can't believe it.
Yeah. And even and just what the other guy says is just so ridiculous.
So it's arguably even more ridiculous. Because again,
and yeah, but what's funny to me? It's like you got all these people listening, right? All these lower and middle class people listening to them saying that they're not actually paying enough in taxes, and it's actually the people you're watching. They're the ones who are paying too much, and there's just all these million people just sitting there. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm the one that's not paying.
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't pay enough in taxes. You're right.
Yeah, that totally jives with my worldview.
You know what?
It's crazy that people don't stop and think of that. Listen to what he's saying.
It's insane.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the best part there is just when they keep on talking about fair share, they're not defining what they exactly what exactly do you mean by share or so for instance, for me, when I think about your fair share, I think about okay, well, where is most of the new income generated, or where is most of the money generated in that fiscal year, and how should we tax it? Typically, basic income inequality trends. If you own 1%, if you're in the top 1%, you're accounting for 90% of all new income generated. So,
right.
If you're in the 1% and you're not paying 90%, I'd say arguably you're not paying your fair share.
Right, and also the thing I always bring up is that Kennedy lowered taxes, Reagan lowered taxes, Bush 1 lowered taxes, Clinton lowered capital gains taxes, Bush cut taxes across the board, but especially on wealthy people. Mm-hmm. Trump had, as they call it, the biggest corporate tax cut in human history. Now we can get on and say, look at the tax structure in America, how it's so unfair. It's almost just it's ignoring the last 70 years of what's happened. And it's just sort of of course, we could have another tax bill, another corporate tax cut, another elimination of estate taxes, and all sorts of things like that, and all add in more loopholes. And then they would just come out and make another video. Look how bad the economy is. Look how much the taxes and too much regulation. It will never stop. It will never end. This opinion there is no perfect level. It's just zero. It's just nothing. It's just full on control of corporations to pretty much be able to do whatever they want without having to give anything back to the government or society. So it's just they keep going with these arguments.
So I think I can offer them a very good bread. If they don't want to pay taxes, that's fine. Join me and we'll campaign for a negative income tax. We'll just have negative taxes across the board. Government just pays everyone money. How about that? No taxes.
Yeah, it's
government pays that. How about that? Because
right.
I don't know where their end point is really going to be. They're not gonna like you said. We have years, decades of like tax cuts after tax cuts after tax cuts. And what's their line of thinking still? Well, we just need to keep on cutting taxes and everything will be great.
Yeah. And also, I think we were talking about before how they even come to this number. Do
Yeah.
they factor in subsidizing oil companies and the military industrial complex and the private prison system? Does that count as government paying towards wealthy, or is that just no, that's just that that has nothing to do with government actually funding wealthy people. We're talking about Social Security, where the people have paid into Social Security for 40 years now are getting money back. So we're going to count the Social Security going to poor old ladies as money going to the poor from the government, but then we're not going to factor in $1 trillion of spending on bombs as money going towards bomb manufacturing corporations that are the stocks are owned majority by wealthy people. They're run by wealthy people. Their bonuses are tied to how many government contracts they can get. And so I would really want to wonder. I mean, if you look at government spending, they almost make it sound like, oh, the government's money just goes towards poor people. But like, if you actually look at the budget, it's kind of hard to actually say that because most of the stuff is on sort of funding like an EPA or an FDA or a lot of it's like the military budget and so how much of it even goes to poor people? I mean, I would bet that this study is just done some Koch brothers funded because that actually makes no sense in the reality. And notice no one mentions a
Study,
study
like where
and where you
exactly?
can find it and where you can look at it. And there actually was a study in done earlier this year that shows decades of corporate tax cuts has not worked. It's a study I send people on Reddit all the time. And then I tell these supply side trickle down people, send me your study that actually shows me that that stuff actually works because I can send you plenty on my end. And it seems like there's no actual scientific consensus that even really works over a long period of time.
Well, actually, like, here's like a quick question. What's like your
Yeah.
opinion on like changing like a capital gains tax to be like more of like a progressive tax as opposed to like the flat tax that it is now?
Yeah, the capital gains.
Because like it is just a
I haven't
flat rate
looked as
like right
much
now.
into that, but here's what I do know. Farmer who goes out there and plows fields, who works and makes a paycheck, has to pay what, 30% of that income? But if you sit at home and you invest in a stock or you take your millions and invest it to make more millions, you pay less on that earnings than someone who's out there working, adding to the means of production and actually providing to the economy. So I actually think that the thinking is total backwards, that we favor people who are just sitting, not actually adding anything, just having their money make them more money, that's going to be a lower tax than someone who goes in and earns a paycheck. Like that whole concept to me is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, a capital gains tax only taxes profit. So it can never be done in a way where you go from making money to losing money because
Yeah,
you can only tax a percentage of the money that you made.
mate.
So they cry like they're going to be losing all this money if you do anything to a capital gains tax when you're literally strictly just taxing like profits.
Yeah. So
So
arguably like your dividends or like realistically, like
so you can only get less yeah, but you can never go from making money to losing money
no.
by increasing a capital gains tax. So it's just ridiculous that Ben Shapiro actually is upset about capital gains taxes, um, while they're sitting there talking about taxing the farmer or the low skilled or regularly skilled average worker who's watching the show at the time. That's just the craziest thing to me.
Yeah, I think like honestly like one of the things that just like my favorite part about like the opening of that clip is just pretty much just like when they're like talking about like yeah, that's how taxes like when they're like explaining it, it's like, yes, that's how taxes work. The less money you make,
Uh,
you typically
yeah.
get benefited more by like our welfare program.
We always act
Correct.
like we
Wow.
always act like we're the ones who know about economics and money and the Democrats, they just have no idea what they're talking about. And people on the left, it's just pure ignorance. They don't even know what taxes are, or they've never actually had to work an actual job and actually had to pay a tax. So like
Oh
these
my
people that
God.
don't
Have you ever
understand,
heard like
they have no idea.
have you ever heard like I was a Democrat until I got a job?
Yeah, yeah, okay. We all see that they passed the biggest corporate tax cut in human history, and now we say Ben Shapiro's telling that the taxes are too high, we're not taxing poor people enough. But of course, half the time they would try and deny this. Shouldn't he have been saying during that tax cut, hey, where's all the taxes on the poor people? If you're going to cut taxes on the corporation, shouldn't you have been saying that? Shouldn't he have been criticizing Trump for not
Chris, you gotta
taxing poor
wait 10
people enough?
years. You gotta wait 10 years.
But no, he was actually sitting there trying to say, look, it does actually do something for poor people. Look at how much it actually cut and helps the middle class worker. So he's trying to actually, at that point, when a bill like that gets passed, it's all about framing it as it actually is a tax cut for poor people when it's really not. And then, on this end of things, now he's going to say, yeah, you actually want to be taxing them more, which is what we were criticizing. We were basically criticizing Trump for not lowering taxes on poor people enough.
Yeah.
So then, of course, he should have agreed with, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
no.
just so backwards.
No, that's what happens when screw the libs is like your whole like point.
And that other guy he had on is just, I mean,
I'm so like, oh my gosh, he
Ben
was
Shapiro was just laughing in his face.
because like Jesus,
Yeah.
like again, like fair share. You have to like define what a fair share is. Like, it's
Right.
not basically like
When the 1% has 90% of the wealth,
then
99% of the wealth.
then technically then it should be like feasible that they would pay like 90% of the taxes or like be part.
Yeah. Which is what the marginal tax rate was in the 1930s under FDR. So, I mean, they act like any sort of tax increase. And and what does Ben Shapiro say about Joe Biden? He's like a jackass who like never created
Yeah,
a
any
job.
jobs, but like Ben Shapiro seems to have a job because of Joe Biden.
But all right, Adam, we've been talking for a while. Is there anything else you want to say? Say to the people.
Thank you very much, people. I love you all. You're all great. You're all wonderful. Excellent people. Best audience around.
All right, Canada, that's our show. Be sure to spread the word. Be sure to share it around. And have a good day.
Yep. Don't be afraid to butt heads.